Today we have the honor of speaking with Andy Qualy, a U.S. Army veteran and one of the founding forces behind the Minnesota Warriors hockey program. Andy's story is one of resilience, service, and an unwavering commitment to helping others. It's nice to have you, Andy.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on.
So, for those who may not know your story, let's start by telling us a bit about growing up as the oldest of three brothers and your decision to join the Minnesota National Guard.
Growing up, well, here's what I'll say. Growing up in the great cold state of Minnesota, your hockey is a lifestyle, and so I grew up. So yeah, I guess those that don't know, originally from Shakopee, Minnesota. And I grew up with the rink right out front right in front of our house, and that's where I learned how to skate, and that's where I learned, first not only skated but picked up a stick and learned to slap a puck around the rink. And we actually had lived not too far from a fairly large lake that we could go down and go walk through the woods and skate on. And so what I will say right up front is that in our family, I should say, hockey is number one, it's a tradition, and number two, it was a lifestyle. We all three of us played, starting in mites, squirts, all the way up, through high school, junior gold. I think both my brothers actually went on and played some junior gold hockey. I myself was a three-time letter winner at Shakopee High School. And I think every kid wants, you think that you're going to play in the NHL, right? Every kid growing up, you want to play in college. That was the big thing too, is, you want to play in college. You want to be a Minnesota Gopher. You want to be, I grew up until the Minnesota North Stars left town.
Yep.
I wanted to be a Minnesota North Star, or, you think you're
Mike
going to play for the
Madonna.
Minnesota Wild,
Yeah.
and I know that what I found, after high school, trying to go the junior route, is that it's not high school anymore. Okay, hockey. I mean, really, in Minnesota, you could say that high school hockey in Minnesota is a business. But what I can absolutely unequivocally tell you is that hockey past high school is absolutely a business. And I'll make a long story short. Going the juniors route and going to and taking that path to college was not in the cards for me. Honestly, I just wasn't successful. And but one thing that I want to also kind of circle back on is that that I think is relevant and I think it's important, is that I was in high school when 9/11 happened.
Yep. What grade were you?
And I think a lot of, if you talk to a lot of GWAT guys, or GWAT, I should say
Yep.
GWAT era guys, that
Yep.
was, I think, a very, very profound, and in many cases, I think if you talk to a lot of guys, it was potentially life-changing event. Is, okay,
Mhm.
I'm walking into my high school classroom,
Yeah.
and it's like on the TV, in your high school classroom. Like, we've got Twin Towers burning, and it's this whole thing, and they're saying that, like, America is under attack. And I think in the wake of that that had for whatever reason, a profound impact
Yeah.
on me. It really, I don't want to say that, like, okay, I made my decision right there that I'm joining the military because I wanted to play hockey. Okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it did put something on my heart a little bit at the time, that, like, it that grain of, like, what, maybe I should serve my country. I think that's where it started, even like in high school. Okay.
Hmm.
So realizing that, like, okay, the juniors route to college hockey, NCAA hockey or whatever, it just wasn't in the cards for me. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, I'm not any good at hockey. Like, I couldn't play the game. It's not that. But I think what people have to understand about hockey being a business past the high school level is that not everybody's going to play. I'm not that big. I mean, at the time, at the in 20 years, the game has changed a lot.
Yeah.
at the time that I was trying to go in there, it's like, there was a lot of fighting and the sticks, the hooks you had to battle every single night, you know, um, and you saw this go on even like I think they called it the clutch and grab era in the NHL. Like if you watch the NHL through the 90s and into the early 2000s,
in the blackout era too, plus
pre-lockout, this was the game. And
yep.
I'm not a big guy, right? I'm just not. Okay. And I mean, I think if you talk to a lot of the coaches, scouts, people, whatever, they would tell you, hey, he's got a great attitude and he's got speed and skill, but I wasn't big and tough enough. It's just that simple. Okay.
Yeah.
And that was honestly, I don't want to say it forced my hand, but it made my decision to, go into the military, a little bit easier. And, I researched it. It's like, okay, I could go active duty military. I could go, into the, I looked at, going into the Marines. I looked at some of these other things. And I think the reason that I chose the Minnesota National Guard was that there were a ton of pathways and a ton of options available because this was getting, so we're talking like 2004 and we're getting to that like high op tempo, right?
Yeah.
For GWAT where, okay, we have to fulfill deployment slots, right?
Correct. Yep.
Across all the different components. And so, at the time they were shelling out like really significant bonuses.
Yeah.
For folks to basically sacrifice your self-determination and go into a combat arms. So I chose to go into the Minnesota Army National Guard and go into the infantry. Again, it was a tough decision in 2003, 2004, right after high school, where I just didn't see myself on a trajectory where I'm going into juniors and I'm going to be a top 6 guy. And I have college offers in front of me. Because you talk to a lot of guys, a lot of the guys that went on and successfully went that route, they had those offers coming in high school, and I just didn't have that, right? So It was a tough decision, but I did it. So I completed infantry school in 2004 at Fort Benning, Georgia. A lot of people watching this are going to be very familiar with that experience. I was assigned to Bravo 119 over there at Sand Hill at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I reported back to my unit, and I will never forget that one of the first sergeants that we had, as we were graduating, was like, they've got us lined up there. We're going up for graduation, and one of the last things he ever said to us is, "Don't bother getting enrolled in because you're going to go to war."
Yeah, yeah. They knew because.
Oh yeah.
Can I circle back? So I was told by an NHL player, there's 2 things. Well, he's a coach now. He said it takes 2 things to get in the NHL: luck being one, and talent. So
yeah,
for any kid out there that wants to do that, just consider those 2 options for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's I mean, I guess to kind of close that thought, it's just, and I mean, I listened to a junior coach flat out saying, look, there's a lot of talented players that aren't going to have anywhere to play after high school, after juniors, after college. The road, it gets more and more narrow. And that's just that was just my reality. And so, but keeping in mind that it had been on my heart
for sure.
The 9/11, it's like, I mean, this is kind of like what was happening in the world at that time. And so, it had, even when I was, even right after, like during high school or right after high school, it, like while I was playing, even like it was on my mind, like it's kind of in the back burner. Like that's something that like you almost feel called. And I think if you talk to a lot of GWAT guys, they felt, if you talk to them, it's like, well, why'd you go in? I felt called.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it was 11th grade for me that happened. And after I joined in 2002. And I think when Minnesota National Guard, when you guys were the main element throughout the whole Iraq theater, I remember seeing you guys everywhere. And I'm like, man, I feel like I'm at home with all these don't you knows and you betchas at the chow hall. And it kind of made me, actually, it was nice. It made me feel a little more better, between you guys being there and all the Porta-Johns saying Minneapolis, Minnesota on there. I don't know if you ever saw that, but
like when when you get deployed, and yeah, everybody's like, it's literally the epitome of the bathroom wall. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. So I reported in my unit 2005, and by the way, that first sergeant's words 100% rang true, because I think I don't think I don't think I was assigned to my unit for 6 months, and we got put on Warno, right? So we knew we were going.
Mhm.
We mobilized 2005, deployed 2006, and I mean I was in a line infantry unit. So just for purposes of clarity, what was my job? I was a line infantryman. That's what I was.
Yeah.
I wasn't special forces ranger, tower power, or anything like that. Now I wouldn't sit here and tell you that I didn't have aspirations, but remember that when you sign a contract and you take that bonus money, you're going where they tell you that you're needed and where they tell you need to go. And basically, if you're especially in a National Guard component, if you're fortunate enough to get a school, say you get a ranger slot, say you get an airborne slot, say you get some of those different things, well then so much the better. But speaking for myself, that for me wasn't going to happen until for sure after this deployment, or even like the option to go and stay active duty. It wasn't on the table. So when I signed that contract, I mean that's what was in the cards. And so we knew early on that we were going to be deploying, and we of course did deploy. So the theater of operation was Iraq, with the First Brigade, and I would say, let's see, I'm trying to think. I want to make sure I have my dates kind of at least somewhat correct. I believe we actually arrived in country like March of 2006, and I was
Yeah.
there. I was there until like literally August of 2006, and this is when things were like heating up, ramping
Hmm.
up. The
Yeah,
longer we were, like, as the months went by, we
that's when
more.
President Bush added the surge too with all the Marines. He because
Yeah,
they were trying to downsize. They were talking like the war's over, we're just here. And then all the stuff started to happen sort of like in the Ramadi area. That's where I was at Cop Corridor.
yeah,
And then I remember seeing on TV and they were ramping back up. So I was like, oh, okay. And you kind of
yeah,
felt it
yeah,
being out there too. So
for sure, for sure. So that was, between like, the range of time that we're talking about is we're talking about like March to
yep.
to August. And as I know for myself, and I think a lot of people would probably identify with this, it was like as the months went on. So March became April, became May, became June. And then, I mean, what I recall is that I would say, so we were out there doing convoy escorts, we're doing route clearance, we're doing patrols, we're doing, I mean, we're like, we have a land ownership.
Yeah.
In our case, we were primarily stationed south of Baghdad, but I myself did actually make my way out to the west,
Hmm.
like you mentioned, Camp Corregidor, but like Al Assad,
Yep.
that area, escorting some convoys out there. And I would say even the first action that I encountered was out near Abu Ghraib.
Oh,
Um,
by the prison.
well, yeah, I kind of, yeah, like kind of out that way on Route Mobile. If people are
Is
listening
that was
familiar,
that was that is that near Fallujah or is that
it would
more?
have been like east of Fallujah, yeah, like
Okay.
towards Baghdad more, I
Okay.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
on Route Mobile there, as you're heading. I guess in our case, we were heading that direction, and then got like that was the first time that like I think we actually took contact, and that was probably April, I want to say. I'll have to double check that. Again, want to make sure I have my dates roughly correct, but it was in that time frame. And
Yeah,
then
I
from
did.
there, it just seemed like things escalated. I mean, we were routinely encountering more resistance and more contact as the months went on. Honestly, to the point where like I know like our brigade, our unit, even like we started taking casualties. I think we had a KIA in June, our first that we became aware of. KIA was in June of 2006, and we had by that time been rattled a few times, even, to be
Mhm.
honest.
Yeah.
And so as that June became July, that summer of '06, I honestly like I just I it became increasingly evident to me that like, no, like we are at war, we are taking contact, and something very much, bad could happen, might happen. I mean, I'm I'm calling home periodically, and
Sure.
very tight-lipped about what's happening, when it's happening, like the who, what, when, where, why, how, because of OPSEC. So I'm not calling home and saying, "Oh my gosh," like it's like we're in the thick of things or anything like that.
Yeah. Plus, you don't want to be that guy that fails the OPSEC and then something it gets out, and then not only, even if nothing happens, if the base mayor person would know about it, he's shutting down all internet, all the sources of, and that might mean that one last phone call to somebody's wife, mother, grandmother, you know what I mean? So absolutely very important.
But there was this one phone call that I had with my dad, and it was only my dad on the call, and I was like, Dad, look, here's here's what I want to happen if I'm KIA, here's what I want to happen if I'm injured. And I think this was like mid to late July 2006. And I mean, think about being a parent. Like if you had a kid deployed and your kid like never talked like that before, but now you're on a phone call and your kid's telling you this. It's like I can't even imagine what went through my dad's head. Like you're hearing this and it's like, whoa, like okay, red flag. Like we don't know what's going on, but he's like, talking. And to be honest with you, looking back at it, I kind of wish I maybe hadn't done that, to be honest with you, because it's like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen, right? Like
it's war, like my first deployment, I was in Fallujah on one of those little pay phones, and we had incoming rounds, just boom 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 boom. She's like, oh my God, what is that? Oh, I don't know, I gotta go, but love you, Ma. Like,
right, what are you supposed to tell him?
I don't want her to.
I might get blown up right now, or I might get like have something.
Yeah, I had a guardian angel both.
So anyway, So to kind of fast forward, in the beginning of August, sure enough, I was in a vehicle that it was just destroyed. And here's the thing about it is that I actually to this day don't remember what, like I never knew what hit us. Like I never knew, like it's like
what kind of, were you in a Humvee or were you like LMTV or?
Yeah, here's a fun story about that. When we arrived in country, we had a lot of like hand-me-down equipment. So we were executing some of these missions in just pieces of crap. These old
the
like
dinosaur
1114s.
Yep.
These 1113s, the M1113s, 14s that they just kept like the transmissions and the chassis and these things like are not set up to handle, like they just kept slapping like up armored kits on these things.
Yeah,
and we're driving them
like
around
45.
We're just blowing out transmissions. Or actually, when we got hit out near Abu Ghraib, we were in a 5-ton truck. So we're in a 5-ton truck with a gun turret. So my point is like we're literally just like operating with whatever we had. So then we finally like get these brand new up armored 1151s. And these things were like brand new. They got air conditioning. They're like hot off the press, and they had like the up armored kits were like built on like. And what was interesting, a couple of things that are interesting. Number one is that if you remember, the combat locks on the old ones locked like it was supposed to be designed with like a seal that was supposed to like protect you from like having your doors ripped off and basically incurring blast injury. So the combat locks on these vehicles locked at the top and at the bottom on the old ones with the up armored kits. So on these new ones, these 1151s, they had the levers all you had to do was pull a lever at the bottom. And it just like it like was supposed to lock, and it was supposed to be like this big new like technology, and they tested it and all this. Well, so we didn't have that new vehicle for a week.
Yeah.
And never, like I think it was August. The date was August 2nd. Routine mission. Next thing I know, I'm being like, I'm just like my world is upside down. Everything is black. Like I'm like I had been knocked out three. And here's the story too about the up armored Humvees is that three. So what I was told is that, I mean, they went and they got like somewhere.
Were you in the gunner position driving, or were
No,
you?
I was actually in the TC seat, which
Okay.
is also interesting because I was either in the gunner's turret or as a combat driver. I was rarely ever in the TC seat, but for this particular assignment, this was out near kind of between like Route Tampa, if you're familiar, if you're looking on your map south of Baghdad, a place called Diwania. So
Tampa,
I mean, somewhere there are pictures. I'm sure there's pictures, but like three. So we've had these brand new vehicles. Well, here's the thing: 3 out of the 4 doors, I think, got ripped off. Our gunner got like thrown. I got thrown. My door had been ripped off. Like we got hit. I never knew what hit us. Everything was just, it was like deleted from my memory camera roll almost. So I mean, I incurred Danny mentioned a traumatic brain injury. I myself have been diagnosed and I had a pretty severe traumatic brain injury. My leg from the knee down had been shattered. I had cuts and shrapnel and stuff. Like I still have like a scar on my left arm. Like it still has like the stitch marks and stuff. I call it my gecko. you know, but it's like this period of time where it's like we're on a routine mission and like deleted from the camera roll, and I'm waking up literally like in a hospital.
In Germany or in Iraq?
That's what it was like. What's
were you? Did they medevac to
yes,
Germany?
Correct. So I was medevac. So I don't have a memory of being medevac via Anaconda.
Okay.
So there was, I'm assuming like Camp Anaconda when they order that medevac, I'm assuming that's like a triage. And so I got to Landstuhl, Germany at Ramstein Air Force Base via Anaconda, and then like eventually to Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And so I would honestly say that like the first cohesive memories that I have would have been at Walter, like getting hauled into Walter Reed. But it's like this.
Do you know how many like from incident to Walter Reed? Like, was that like a week or 2 weeks? Do you recall?
I think about a week, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. I would have to go back and verify that. Maybe like 7 or 8 days.
Sure, they must have
because I was stabilized at Landstuhl, and I think they kind of knew even at that time, like when I was at Landstuhl, that like like excuse me, I'm getting over a little something myself.
Yeah.
But they knew at Landstuhl that like, okay, I'm gonna get medevac. Like that, I arrived there, and I don't think it took them too long to figure out, like, okay, well, I mean, this guy's not going back to, like, no doctor was going to sign off on me going back to a combat zone. I mean, my face was like smashed, like my nose was all messed up. I had slammed, like I had an open wound in my head.
Yeah.
I think the foreskull was like fractured, and again, cuts, scrapes, shrapnel injuries. My leg from the knee down is like shattered. It's like, this guy's, pretty messed up. I mean, I didn't lose the leg. I mean, it could have been a lot worse, right?
Sure.
And
it could always be worse.
Somewhere there must be pictures of this vehicle. I think they said, because obviously they would have had to do an LOD investigation of some kind, figure out what happened. And 3 out of the 4 doors are ripped off. And I mean, I think it might have even like caught fire. I'm not, don't hold me to that one, but I mean, like all our equipment's like a combat loss, basically, So I had to have multiple surgeries done, kind of over the course of that initial 2-3 months that I was at Walter Reed. I was there for kind of in recovery.
Sure.
For a total of 7, I think it might have been coming up on 8 months that I was there between August of 2006 and like March of 2007, kind of that time frame. And, at the time, transitioning from being an inpatient at the hospital to an outpatient, they had programs where, injured soldiers could go home on like community-based health. They were, at the time, they were calling it CBHCO. And So my overwhelming priority upon my getting to Walter Reed and recovering was I did not want to be there, and I did not want to be at home. I wanted to be with I wanted to get back to my unit. Mm-hmm. Period. It's like if you're a professional athlete, do you want to be out of the game?
No.
So I'm in my they assigned me a case manager once I transitioned from the hospital to the outpatient campus, and I was in my case manager's office probably twice a day, when he's sending me back. Yeah. When am I going back? I'm not hurt that bad. I feel like I could go back and do my job. And again, what you have to understand about my situation is that, looking back on it retrospectively, especially having gone through my educational journey and knowing what I know about the medical field, it's listen, there was not a doctor in the entire DOD that was going to sign off on sending me back to the combat zone.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's take a quick water break. We'll stop recording. We can cut that part out so you can grab up some water so you can let her clear our throats, and then we'll kick it off at the Walter Reed part. Yeah.
Your recovery journey was incredibly challenging. What kept you motivated during your time at Walter Reed Army Medical Center?
Yeah, honestly, what I will say right up front is that, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I'll kind of say it again, is that my motivation was that I wanted to get back to my unit. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be with my guys because, obviously just because I'm injured and out of the fight, that doesn't mean that okay, all of a sudden the war's over. And I mean, my guys are still over there and we're still having taking contact. I mean, let me put it this way. I mean, myself and the guys that were in my element and in my truck. I mean, we weren't the last casualties from our unit. I mean, they're still over there fighting. And so my motivation toward my recovery was I wanted to be with my unit. So I mean, I didn't want to go home on, CBHCO or warrior transition, I think is what they're calling it now. And I did not want to be sitting at that hospital, twiddling my thumbs, doing nothing. I wanted to be back with my unit. That was my motivation. And at the same time, what I recall is that, I think I mentioned this before, but I had to undergo multiple surgeries, that skull fracture and the facial situation, lower skull up through my septum area and my nose. I mean, they had to go in and they had to redo that. I had to have surgery on my leg. As I recall, there was at one point along the way a question, or it was being asked, is there any possibility, am I going to lose this leg? Yeah. Because it was basically shattered from the knee down. And no, I mean, the short answer is no. But of course, at the time, it's I'm freaking out, because it's I don't you're if that's even a discussion that we're having, holy crap, that's pretty serious. But it just wasn't injured that bad. They were certainly able to reset it and get it put back together. But that required some metal parts. There was what they call a Harrington rod was inserted in there, and there were plates both in my knee and at my ankle. And so right there, that made me, I mean, by the book at least, okay, that made me not I am no longer MOS qualified. I am no longer a deployable asset to the United States Army. Right there, because of and that's what people have to remember is that so when these injuries, it's not always about what's right. It's about what's by the book. What makes somebody a deployable asset. Or if you're basically handed a medical profile, in my case, or what ended up being pretty much a permanent medical profile, which was them basically coming back and saying, well, you've got some real challenges here, and we don't know how long it's going to take you to heal. Yeah. Not to mention, I had undergone a battery of testing for traumatic brain injury and failed. Honestly, I was not in a good way physically, and. But I think also along with that, the motive, once it became clear after I was at Walter Reed that my so I think I mentioned that like I'm in my case manager's office twice a day, like when he's sending me back, and she was, she was a first lieutenant, I think, um, and she was like a total, like really nice, like honestly, like she was great. She was a really nice person, like wanted to look out for me, but she had to sit me down. They brought in the med holdover, first sergeant, and like we had to sit down and like they had to kind of look me in the eyeballs and say, "You're like Qualy, you're not going back." And that was, for me, that was devastating, honestly.
Yeah.
That was devastating because it's like, what am I supposed to do now?
Did you talk to any of your guys back that were still in theater while you were at Walter Reed too?
Yeah, I mean, I stayed in touch with them as much as I was able, but I mean, there was a point where my TBI was so bad that I couldn't sit in front of a computer screen without basically like having a headache. And maybe Danny can kind of relate with that a little bit. Really anybody that's like, if you've had a moderate to severe traumatic brain injury, you can kind of, like your sensitivity to light and sound and like all the senses, like your cognition maybe isn't clear. And I mean, what I recall is that I was already kind of experiencing depression and sleep problems and all these things. But upon receiving that, like kind of heart to heart, like Qualy, you're not going back. That was like, it was like cliff diving for me, honestly. And the other thing that I recall during that time was that the pain, the physical pain, the constant physical pain that I had in my head, that I had in my arm, that I had in my leg, like all the time. And the Army's way of handling that pain at the time is, this is 2006, I think I mentioned, late 2006 into 2007. They're handing out like narcotic medications like candy at Walter Reed. Yeah. And I think there's a context there. If you talk to any medical provider, any of the doctors, anybody up there, like I believe that they genuinely want to help soldiers. They want to help feel better. They like no doctor, no provider anywhere wants to see their patient like experiencing pain. But also remember that at the height of the op tempo, during that surge that Nick, you alluded to this, in 2006, there was a surge. Well, so we saw, I think in the wake of that, well, okay, more troops in theater and more boots on the ground means more casualties.
Correct.
We had an opponent that was waging war, plain and simple. Like that was the reality that we all faced. Every single time we went out on the wire, we knew that, like, you know what, I might not be coming back, right? And so in the wake of that, what we saw go on at Walter Reed was the influx of wounded and injured soldiers coming back literally on a daily basis. I could go down to the main hospital campus and like every single day and watch the helicopters fly in with dead on arrivals and like mass casualties and like severe casualties, guys who were hurt a lot worse than me. I'm just going to say that. They're missing arms, legs. They're they're horrible burns, eyes. They're missing eyes, ears, noses, and they're at the highest acuity in the wake of being a combat casualty, or in maybe a lot of cases, a non-combat related injury, whatever it was. We saw an influx happen at Walter Reed, and they were not postured to handle that influx. And so when I transitioned to the outpatient side and I was staying in the Malone house, the pain management plan was Percocet, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And so I think you guys can kind of see where I'm going with this a little bit. Like, okay, this guy just got told he's done. You're not going back. And oh, by the way, here's a profile to go with it. Or a permanent profile like this,
like a medical retirement, some sort.
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, what it came down to for me was, they came back and said, okay, well, we got three options. Number one, you could try and stay in, and you could try and reclass to a different MOS because you're not MOS qualified anymore. Like, you're not going to be going back and doing infantry, at least not anytime soon. And it would have taken a waiver, like a miracle of a waiver, even at that time, with the given the injuries and the challenges that I had. It was going to take a freaking miracle of a waiver to get them to ever let me probably go back in combat arms. I would have had to have like healed up and showed them that, yeah, you're a deployable asset. Option two was, well, you can sit here and wait for a medical review board to determine you're retired. Like, are you retirable? And what I had, my case manager and folks down there telling me was like, well, so the reality is that you'll probably get a disability rating, but you're probably not going to be like fully medically retired because of the ambiguous nature of the injuries. They might heal, they might not. We don't know. So the DOD was probably going to come back and give me a disability rating, which I then was going to have to turn around and waive to go back and receive VA benefits. Basically, is what they told me. But the other issue was that soldiers were waiting years to get in front of a medical review board at Walter Reed at that time.
Yeah.
Like, and again, because of that influx, right? So that was, I mean, I think for me, that was less than ideal. And then, so the last option was basically a release from active duty. You're done. You're out, and you go back to Minnesota and serve out the rest of your contract with whatever profile you have. You go back, like, and that might be, it might be an AGR role, it might be an ADSW role, it might be, any number of those things. Well, oh man, it's kind of hard to talk about like that cliff that I kind of fell off of.
Yeah.
After getting that news that, like, you're done. I mean, let me give you some perspective. The 1st Brigade Combat Team, Minnesota Army National Guard, that had been deployed, they got extended, and they're particularly famous because they incurred one of the longest single deployments of any element that was ever deployed. They got extended in conjunction.
I remember that.
I think that was in 2007, actually. Or right in the beginning of 07, I think, is when they got told, yep, you're staying, type of thing.
I remember that too, Andy. Yeah. And real quick too, one on my first deployment, 2003 to 5, it was sort of ended 2003, so more like 4 to 5 or whatever. It was like OIF 1.2 or something like that, or however they're keeping track. I had a guy in my unit, Sergeant Bang, get hit by an incoming round, just tore up his forearm, and he went to Walter Reed. And like, I swear to God, it was like a year and a half, 2 years later, I'm daytime Maury TV, and there he is on the Maury show, because he was still at Walter Reed waiting to get the heck out of there. He was one of the best NCOs I've ever, like, he was the guy that would march the reservists down the road because nobody else knew how to march and stuff like that, Great NCO.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think to your point, Nick, that was honestly, like, I think you illustrated very poignantly, like, the reality of what a lot of folks who had been badly injured, had permanent profiles or any type of profile, and were waiting, like, okay, just to get evaluated by a medical review board for the, the Army or the DOD. That's how, like, it was taking years. I think they told me at the time in 2006, 2007, well, yeah, you're looking at 2 years minimum before you even get in front of a board, and you're not I was still on active duty.
Yeah.
And they weren't gonna, like, I think I mentioned, like, I was considered not a candidate at the time for the CBHCO program. Now, that might have been able to change, but it's like, okay, so is it better if I go home to Minnesota and I'm sitting there, waiting for a medical review board? Not really. And so I think I kind of mentioned that it's hard to talk about a little bit, that cliff that I kind of fell off of upon getting that news that, like, hey, like, the show's over.
Yeah.
Because all I wanted to do was get back to my unit. That was and so having that, like, taken away, that kind of, like, it kind of cut my motivation level for my own recovery at the Achilles, for intents and purposes. And what did I turn to? Isolation. My sleep hygiene was crap. I was increasingly using alcohol and Percocets. I would say that I developed a prescription narcotic medication dependence. Honestly, I'm being honest. I mean, that's what it kind of turned into. And at the time, there were soldiers turning up like dead in their rooms because of the lack of oversight that was happening at Walter Reed and the number of prescription medications, like soldiers overdosing in their rooms on alcohol and pills and that kind of a thing. And I'll never forget this one time. It might have saved my life. I had to go to the main hospital for a blood they took blood. Okay. They checked my, they checked my vitals. They did a blood test. They took a bunch of labs. And no sooner than I got like back to, I'm hobbling back to my room with my cane and my walking boot, or whatever. Yeah. No sooner do I get back, I have this frantic message on my my phone, the phone in my room at the Malone house, which was kind of like a hotel. Yeah. I've got this frantic voicemail like telling me, don't take any more of those like Percocets. You have to stop. We are sending somebody to your room. And they're going to confiscate those. And the reason is because what they found, I'm going to admit, like openly admit the fact that like I was using alcohol and I was using those pills at the same time, and it was increasing. And they saw that in the blood work.
They saw that those milligrams increased.
The liver enzymes were through the flipping roof.
Yeah.
So now I landed in the freaking ASAP program. Which so now all of a sudden I've got like, they're kicking my door into my room and they're confiscating everything, like going through my stuff, and like they took the pills, can't do that anymore. Well, so it just became this whole thing. But I think I think that kind of gives you an idea of like, honestly, like it was a bad deal, kind of across the board. When I was at Walter Reed, I was not in a good way. If I'm being very honest with you, like my body, I felt like my body was wasting away. I felt like I had no purpose. Now I've turned to basically drugs and alcohol to try and cope with it and feel better without any real clear direction. I mean, at the time I had a high school education. Okay. So I go back to Minnesota. What am I going to do? Honestly, like nobody had stopped at any point to really ever tell me that, like, hey man, there's life after the military, especially because I survived it.
Yeah. It seems so simple looking back now, but when you're in that hole, the challenges, it seemed like you got to go climb a mountain with no equipment.
Right. And it's like I have, like, I think at the time, I think I was 22 years old. I don't high school education, and like for me, nothing past my life existed beyond that deployment. I think it was kind of like, we get back stateside. If I survive, I'll kind of figure it out. Okay. Well, there is one noteworthy thing of positivity, actually, that was taking place during this time. So I've illustrated and I kind of described like Walter Reed, but it was a tough road. I was in physical pain. I was in mental pain. I'm turning to drugs and alcohol. I'm overusing it. To the point where I 100% met the clinical criteria as abusing it. I mean, let's just be real. Okay. But there was one positive in the middle of all this. And that positive was that it just so happened that at the time that I was at Walter Reed, going back to, I think, October of 2006, the NHL was there. And it just so happened that in Washington, D.C., which is where Walter Reed is, of course, they have the Washington Capitals. And I actually was sitting in my room watching TV, and I had just had a new roommate come into my room by the name of Drew Hill. Come in, and Drew, you guys know Drew.
I know
you
Drew.
You know who he is generally.
Yeah, I know who he is. Like I saw the documentary. That you did, like with the operation.
Yeah. So Drew Hill, he was. I mean, we didn't serve together. He had been injured in Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Group, and I know that his MLS was aviation. I don't recall all the details about like his situation. But what I do know is that he was pretty severely injured too. Obviously that's why he was there. And so when we initially crossed paths, he hadn't had a lot of exposure to hockey, but in any case, we were rooming, I think by October of 2006, we had been rooming together at the Malone House at Walter Reed. He's injured in Afghanistan with 10th Mountain. I was injured in Iraq. And so we're both like there convalescing. And I kind of, I think a key context here is that remember that having been activated to go to go and deploy in support of Iraqi freedom, I had been since going all the way back to 2004. I had been away from hockey.
Yeah,
and I had kind of given up. Like, okay, my dream of playing in the NHL and my dream of playing in college, and that when I made the decision to join the military, it all kind of went by the wayside, right? Okay. And so this was, I think this is relevant because it's like, I'm sitting there with nothing to do and I'm popping pills and, we're drinking and we're sitting there and I'm in pain and all this, but it's like, I see an ad come on for the Washington Capitals. And I'm kind of like, wow, that it kind of like ignited something a little bit like inside of me, like, wow, that would be like, man, like that would be kind of cool to be able to go down and see a game. And so, I think a week or two went by and I'm kind of talking to Drew and he didn't, Drew came from Southern Virginia. I mean, what do you have in Southern Virginia? You got stock car racing, you've got, they're sportsmen, they're fishing, hunting, stock car racing, football, especially college football.
Mountains. Climbing mountains.
Yeah. I think he was a big, he had rollerbladed, he was a big snowboarder, that type of stuff, right? Not a lot of exposure to ice hockey, and so I finally, to make a long story short, I finally convinced him because he wasn't really like jumping at it at first. He was like, I don't know, ice rinks are. I think he said something like ice rinks are cold, and that doesn't really sound fun and all that, But to make a long story short, we finally, I think this was late October of 2006. We go down, and finally get down to the Washington Capitals game. And again, I'm coming in. I think I was even still on crutches at the time. I was, I'd had the surgeries done in August, so I was still convalescing from the surgeries that had been done on my leg, and they had the metal parts in there and stuff. But we go down to the game, and the first thing I noticed is like, everybody's wearing this. Like I couldn't even pronounce it. It was like number 8, Ovechkin. I'm like trying to read everybody's got these jerseys, and I'm like Ovechkin. Like I'm like trying to pronounce it or whatever, and I'm like, why does this? Why, like, what's the big deal about, like, why is everybody wearing this guy's jersey? I barely, like, because keep in mind, I'd never seen the guy play. I've been basically out of hockey and out of the loop and like deployed and activated.
And the blackouts.
Yeah, like since all the way back to 2004, not to mention the lockout.
Yeah. Or the
so
lockouts,
I get it. Yeah. So I get in there, and I think we were sitting like, the upper part of the lower bowl towards the stairway, just so that I could, if had my crutches or whatever, just so I could like easily, hobble in and out, and it wasn't going to be like I wasn't going to like trip and fall on my face or whatever.
Yeah.
So they get out there, and we had gotten there early. We get out there for warm-ups, and I remember they were playing the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh,
guys. Yeah. They were playing the Tampa Bay Lightning, and so we get out for warm-ups, and okay, it's hockey. Everybody looks normal, and then there's this guy. He's got a tinted visor. He's got these yellow skate laces, and he's got like his laces like hanging out. The freaking tongues on his skates are like out past his toes.
Is this the emergency like winger?
Yeah, I'm looking
from the crowd.
And this he was like this guy, like you could hear him yelling across the whole rink in warm-ups, like I've never seen anything like it. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. with this. Like, what an absolute tool bag. I'm looking at it, I'm like, what in the, who is this?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Sure enough, it's the guy whose jersey that like everybody's wearing. And so I was just like beside myself. And I think it's also worth noting that one of the things, because remember, I had a traumatic brain injury, and so like my lens through which I saw the world was kind of different, kind of altered, kind of foggy. But like that stuck out to me. And the other thing that stuck out to me is Capitals had acquired, or they had a guy playing there by the name of Ben Clymer, who, if you know, he's doing FanDuel, or he's doing like the Minnesota Wild, like commentating and broadcasting now. But I recognized him immediately because he was a Bloomington Jefferson star in high school. Well, when you're in Minnesota, you go to the state tournament, or you watch the state tournament every year. You don't miss it. Okay, I'm a kid, watching those Bloomington Jefferson teams of the 90s just dominate, high school hockey and stuff like that. And Clymer was one of several guys actually from those teams that would go on to the NHL and all that.
And I'll add, like, for those not from Minnesota, after the North Stars left, that high school hockey, I think, elevated to, like, in our minds, like a pro level. Like now, like everybody wants to go see these guys.
Yeah. I mean, it was like the thing. But even, I mean, to be honest with you, even when the North Stars were there, it was like, okay, state tournament time. Like, like that was like it's like a holiday in Minnesota. So anyway, we're at the game. It's late October 2006, and I recognized Clymer. I was like, wow, that is so, like, that's like, I know him. That's so cool. I don't really know anybody else, but okay. So we get into the game, and at the time, the Capitals were rebuilding. They weren't a good team. I don't think they were expected to really be competitive. But I got to tell you what, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this Ovechkin guy, he just looks like a tool. Like, I'm just like, what in the hell? Like, why is everybody wearing this guy's jersey? Well, let me make a long story short. I found out in the first period of that game why. This kid, I've never seen anything so, like, electrifying, like polarizing. Like, this kid was a bull in a china shop, and there was not a lot to his game at the time. His game was get the puck, go, like, he's like 6'3", 220 pounds or something. He's just a huge kid. His game was get the puck, go north-south, and if anybody tries to step up and check him, he's going to run you over. And if the puck goes in the zone, he hits everything that moves. His game was shooting and hitting.
Yeah.
And it was like a bull in a china shop. And so, that was kind of like my introduction to the Washington Capitals at that time. But what it did, I think that's significant, because what that did is it reignited something about like the game of hockey inside of me, because Drew and I became regulars at those games.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we became there were tickets being handed out to patients, like soldiers and stuff at Walter Reed. So a lot of those games we ended up going to for free. We're part of Green's gang, or we're part of Obi's Crazy Eights or whatever. There's a picture of me with Ovechkin actually after one of those games. They took us down into the locker room, and we got to meet Ovechkin and get his autograph.
If you can, send that to us after, when you get a chance, if you find it.
I think I have that one on Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So there's that one. But so we became regulars at those games, and it was honestly like a privilege to and it was like, at the time, it was the only positive thing that I can really point to during my recovery at Walter Reed, that like, okay, I had a bad day. I'm in pain. I took too many pills. Whatever it was, like, it was like the one thing that I had to look forward to, is like, oh man, when's the next game? When's the next home game? Are we going to be there? That kind of like became the thing. And so having a chance to watch Ovechkin specifically, during his, I think it was his second year in the league at the time. or something like that. And I mean, like it was just it was such a joy, and it brought immediate joy to my life, where previously we didn't have it. There was one game we had like glass side seats for the Capitals against the Penguins, who, as you'll recall, Sidney Crosby was just coming in about the same time, and so there was this rivalry between Ovechkin and Crosby. I mean, there was one game where we had like glass, like ringside seats for that, and that was like, that became like the outlet and the escape.
Sure.
Well, so let me fast forward real quick. There was one game where we had gotten tickets, or they had sent tickets to Walter Reed or to the Malone House, or I don't know. There were a couple different foundations, I think, that they were like working through to get those, but we had gotten some, and my roommate Drew invited. So he was working with a physical therapist named Ann Moore at the time.
Okay.
And so the three of us, I think this was like December of 2006, the three of us are going down to a Capitals game. So it's Ann Moore, myself, and Drew. We are getting a ride or whatever down to the Verizon Center. And so during this car ride in December of 2006, all of a sudden, like we kind of, I don't even remember how we got on the topic, but it kind of got onto this, like, it would be kind of cool if we were able to, like, get on the ice or something, Yeah. And Ann Moore was a physical therapist. I think kind of the flavor of that discussion was like, wow, hockey could be like, it could be kind of used like as a therapeutic tool to help some of these guys in their recovery. And that was profound, I think, because I think that's where, like, the first glint in the eye, if you will, of like, wow, like, what would it mean? I wasn't thinking about hockey. I wasn't thinking about ever going back and doing hockey or being on the ice. It was not a thought that I had at the time.
Sure.
But that's where that seed kind of was like, wow, that actually, it just got me thinking, like, actually, that could be kind of cool, And I think Drew was like, keep in mind, Drew was like hooked on hockey.
Yeah.
As soon as we started going to those Capital games, like he wanted, like he wanted to be at every game. He wanted to be at every single game. He got hooked. So I think we both kind of were like, wow, that would be like, well, actually that would be kind of cool. And so then what happened is I think, a few more discussions, kind of took place over the coming months. And it kind of got to a point where I think Drew took it more seriously than I did. And I think that the reason for that is that was a function of kind of just where I was at mentally and physically, But what I didn't realize is that he was going to do it. He was going to like he did it. And he kept saying, like, you know what, like, man, like, I think we could do this. Like, we should do this. Why don't we do this?
How's your foot feeling at this moment?
Yeah, I'm kind of smiling and nodding, and I'm kind of like, yeah, man, cool. Yeah, we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
But not really believing it. Well, let me make a long story short. I ended up releasing, or I got a refrad. I took option 3. Let me just recap. Number 1, I could try and stay in and reclass. Number 2, I could sit and wait years, plurally, for a medical review board. Or 3, I could refrad. And remember that, like I'm going to be very upfront with you guys. I believe that if I had stayed at Walter Reed, I might not be here today. I'm gonna say it. Because I was getting hooked, and it was going to become a bad, it was going to become potentially a bad deal. That medical provider that found that probably saved my life. I can't remember her name, but I can remember her face. I'm glad. I think if I had stayed there with that kind of, even after the intervention, that kind of ready access to those medications, I just think I don't want to think about like what the outcome of that might have been. And so for the reason that I basically was like, just get me out, get me out of here. That's why, honestly.
Yeah.
So it's early 2007. I'm showing up, I mean, I'm not even in uniform when I get home. I'm getting off a plane. I got I got an A bag. I got a suitcase. I got luggage. I think I had an A bag.
Yeah.
Something like that. And I mean, it's like 10 below, and it's like I think February, or I think it was like March. I think it was March.
Yeah.
But it was like right early.
It's one that it could go either way. It could be really hot, or it could be
it was
10 below.
Yeah, it was so cold. And I mean, there wasn't a parade for me. There wasn't anything. It's like my dad coming down to the airport, picking me up and going home. And I'm not ashamed to share this. Actually, that night had an absolute like meltdown.
Yeah.
By myself. And it was like everything came like it was like a freight train that like jumped off the track, and like everything just piles up behind it into like it just like I had an absolute meltdown. I'm in the house. I'm in the house that I grew up in. And it's like everything came full circle. And now I'm right back where it all started years later. Keep in mind, after 2004, 2005, 2006. Now it's early 2007. And I'm just sitting there like bawling, like by myself, just like in the darkness. Like what am I going to do now? I was so scared.
Yeah. When I got off active duty, I know exactly what you're talking about. You sort of lose, that's your identity for however long you go through some of the hardest challenges you might have ever been through in life, and you earn that uniform. You earn the right to serve with a squad of your teammates, and then you're done. It's like, well, now it's just hanging in a closet.
Right. So. Right. And it's like, I think I mentioned this, like my life didn't really exist past that deployment. And then, I mean, Walter Reed, kind of that whole thing. I mean, it was a stopgap, but there was a positive that came out of that experience. As I mentioned, we had the Capitals, we had that entertainment, but we had that connection. And I stayed in regular touch with Drew after that, and even went back several times. But finally, I think it was it was later on in 2007, I get a phone call. And it's Drew, and he's like, hey, you remember that thing we were talking about that you said like you didn't think we would do? Yeah, guess what? We got ice time. And we got some guys that are going to go down to the rink. And he was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't even know who else is going to be there, but we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, what do you like doing what? What do you like what do you mean? Doing like you're doing it. You're doing what? Well, it turns out this whole time, I mean, Drew was out there. He was down there, and I know that Ann Moore, that physical therapist, if you Google USA hockey, there's an article that came out sometime in like 2007, 2008. It still comes up for USA Hockey magazine. There's an article about, it's titled "The Warrior's Way," and you will see her name in that article as like a facilitator or a supporter of this thing. But this was already in the works in mid to late 2007. And to make a long story short, they did it. They got together and they organized. They got in touch with like USA Hockey, and there was a USA Disabled Hockey rep, or a USA Hockey person by the name of Bob Bannock, who I think got involved, caught wind of this, and I, to be honest with you, I wasn't there when they pitched it to Bob Bannock. You'll see his name kind of popping up.
Yeah, it pulled right up. I'll send it to you, Danny, after, and then so we can put it up.
Yeah. I don't know how they pitched it, but to make a long story short, between 2007, 2008, USA Disabled Hockey really got involved, really got behind it. And so I'm now getting a phone call saying, hey, I think this was like 2008. It's Drew saying, get your ass down here. Like, you need to come and see this. You need to come and like experience this.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, okay, I at the time, so when I came back to Minnesota, I ended up basically serving out the rest of my formal time on my contract in an ADSW role. So I was working in the Minnesota National Guard J1 office up in St. Paul there, and so I mean that was an okay gig. I mean it wasn't like a total loss of like, okay, well now I got to go back to school, get a job, all that, like you know um they caught it, like they were really good about like tracking me, and I had folks from the unit readiness reaching out to me, and I had an Army chaplain by the name of John Morris actually reach out to me, and he was instrumental, and in fact is responsible for igniting my passion for veterans issues, military reintegration issues, and all that.
Yeah.
So I was working in his office, basically almost like for him, going out talking about some of my challenges, and working in his office and going out to the reintegration events and doing all those things. But in the meantime, so Drew's back at Walter Reed, and he's saying like they did it, they put it together. And so what I saw, I think I traveled back out there in 2008, and I've got my bag with me, and my leg had healed to the extent that I could be on the ice, but I mean it still wasn't. I was still having a lot of pain, and I still had the metal parts in there, and it was like I'd gone back to the to the VA in Minneapolis to continue the treatment and the therapies, and I was in the polytrauma clinic for my TBI up there and doing all these things. So I go back out to Walter Reed 2008, and I was shocked at what I saw. I had never seen anything like it. What they had put together is basically they were so Drew, they had brought in a guy, a coach from disabled hockey by the name of Steve Monahan.
Yeah, he was on one of the pictures on the article.
Yeah, a guy by the name of Steve Monahan. I believe he's still working with the USA Warriors out there, even to this day, if I'm not mistaken. But what they were doing is they were putting on these clinics. So USA Disabled Hockey got in there. They threw him some jerseys. They got him some funding. They got him some equipment.
Sorry.
And they had filed for, and they were starting a nonprofit. Okay, so they have the USA Warriors. I believe were formally incorporated as a nonprofit in 2008.
Okay.
So they had the support of USA Disabled Hockey at that time. And what I saw when I went back down there was I hadn't seen anything like it. I saw a group of active duty service members from Walter Reed, and I think there were a couple of veterans out there, or folks who had been like patients at Walter Reed and then like stayed around maybe in the area, participating with this group. And they would show up, and they had guys in sleds, and they had Mark Little was one of my favorite stories. He was he was injured. Was he injured in Afghanistan? Anyway, he had lost both his legs. He's a double amputee. He was out there skating upright on two prosthetics, and they had guys standing, and they had guys in sleds, and they were just going through and like doing these drills and stuff like that. And it was absolutely incredible to be there and see that, and then have a chance to be a part of that. And that's where, for me, that's where the story starts, is that we had these discussions going all the way back to like December of 2006.
Yeah.
We're sitting here talking about it. It started out as this dream or this idea.
Yeah.
Well, they did it. They literally did it. I couldn't believe it, to be honest with you. I couldn't believe it. So, I got back down there somewhat regularly. I know that I recall that I traveled down there several times, and it just, every single time, it just grew on me. But I think that two things stood out to me. There was the physical component, that these injured veterans and these injured soldiers are out here doing it. But what I also noticed was the atmosphere that they had in their dressing room. What they had, like the camaraderie that they had in their dressing room, like these guys lived to get to that next practice, kind of like how I lived to get to the next Capitals game, if you will. It's kind of like This is because a lot of those guys are going through the same challenges I was. And in fact, I think if you talk to a lot of them, I personally know of stories of guys that were at Walter Reed recovering that were like, they had it even worse than me. I hate to say it, but like,
yeah,
you know, like their recovery journey was literally years, plurally, before they could even get out of Walter Reed.
Yep.
So in 2009, fast forward, that's when I think the discussion about, I think it was like early 2009. What happened was that guys kind of started to cycle through the USA Warriors program where, okay, I'm injured, but I'm here, but I'm not staying here. Kind of like me. Like, okay, I'm released from active duty, or I got med boarded out, or I'm PCSing, or I'm being reassigned, or I'm going like there, or I'm going home to the Warrior Transition Unit to recover, or whatever. It kind of became a little bit of a revolving door. So then I think that's when Drew and I certainly were started to have some of the discussion about what would it mean to like expand this program.
Yeah, what does that look like?
To have it exist like in other parts of the country, such that these guys would conceivably have somewhere to go. Well, so that's where in 2009, that's where the discussion started to happen. Where okay, now Drew, he started pushing my buttons a little bit, like, why don't you do this in Minnesota? And I'm like, yeah, I take you seriously now. Why don't we do this in Minnesota, where I'm from? Right. Well, so let's fast forward. Okay. He, via the folks in Walter Reed and at USA Disabled Hockey, got me in touch with Tony. I think at the time it was Tony O'Brien. It's Tony Gillen now, and she's still leading disabled hockey in USA Disabled Hockey in Minnesota.
Okay.
They got me in touch with Tony.
Mm-hmm.
So it's September of 2009, and I'll never forget this. I met up with her at a Caribou Coffee in West St. Paul, right off of Robert Street there.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the starting point, if you will, if you want to call it that, for the Minnesota Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, okay, and keep in mind, like, all right, I think by that time I was back in school. Danny mentioned vocational rehabilitation. I myself also went back to school on the Chapter 31 voc rehab.
Yep.
It's one of the best kept secrets in the VA.
It's great. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Nick, maybe you got
I used it both for school, but I'm currently using it this gentleman named Glenn, who's down here in Florida, who's helping me through the process of getting a career.
For sure. Yeah. So you're familiar. You know the program. Yeah, you've been through it. Danny knows the program. So that's kind of where I was at in my journey. Is okay. I got a high school education. I had been hooked up, again, working with the J1 office at the Minnesota Army National Guard, and with, through Chaplain Morris.
Mm-hmm.
And, he very well, I was by that time, very well connected. So I was going back to school, but keep in mind, I don't know how to, I have no business experience. I have no experience really with USA Disabled Hockey. We knew how they kind of had built it down in Washington, D.C. at Walter Reed.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we going to do this in Minnesota? How are we going to emulate what they did? Because I think the idea at the time is, well, we want to emulate what they're doing in Washington, D.C. at Walter Reed. We want to be under that disabled hockey umbrella. Okay. Well, so Tony was instrumental.
Yeah.
In the formation of this group. And so the first thing that we had to do was form a board of directors and bring in some other people who had experience in hockey associations, with nonprofits, with
all the legalities,
like running the finances, with how are we going to go out and market this? Where are we going to get money? That kind of a thing. And actually, when the Minnesota Warriors started, we worked hand in hand with the USA Warriors a guy named Chris Dernitz down with the USA Warriors was running their finances, and was Chris Dernitz. I got to give him a shout out. He's actually no longer with us. He passed some years ago, actually, unfortunately, but absolutely great guy. Chris Dernitz kind of took us under their wing a little bit. Mm-hmm. We actually used their nonprofit ID, and so the we had our first board meeting in March of 2010, and Tony had helped me kind of get in touch with some folks that she knew that might want to help out with this. Like Loretta Schlachta Fairchild had been the treasurer with the Rosemont Hockey Association, for example. Yep. Steve Dory was a guy that my dad knew from I think they had done some book.
Was Barry part of the initial?
Barry came in. He wasn't right away.
Okay.
But he was Barry was early. He was after about a year of so I think Barry kind of took notice of us, and again that was through Minnesota hockey. But I think Barry came in around 2011. But so he was early, but not right there at the beginning in those initial meetings. Our first board meeting was March of 2010 at Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub.
Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Which is, by the way, off 7th Street, about 3-4 blocks from the XL Energy Center.
Correct.
Minnesota Wild play. So, yeah. And Tom Reed's a sort of hockey legend from Minnesota himself.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I've got my dad. I mean, it was kind of a I don't want to call it a ragtag group, but it was a kind of this hodgepodge of people that
that wanted to be involved. Yeah.
Yeah. We might want to or that we might want to we want to hear more about it type of a thing. But that was the birthplace of, as we know it, the Minnesota Warriors. But I think for the first year of the program, we fell directly under the USA Warriors. Even using their nonprofit EIN number and the whole thing. They were basically running our finances at the start until we could go out and file our own 501c3 and get our own bank account and get all that set up. So that was, I think, about the first year and a half of the program. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to brand ourselves underneath and emulate what they were doing in Washington D.C. with the sled hockey and the standing amputee and the whole thing. Well, real early on in the history of the Minnesota Warriors, we realized that we don't have what they have at Walter Reed. Now, what was that? Well, they had a concentration of severely injured soldiers, amputees, guys, guys that would have been disabled hockey eligible, amputee or Paralympic hockey eligible, or sled, or that we're gonna do sled hockey. I actually called back to the Minnesota at one point, the Minnesota National Guard J1 office, and I asked them straight up, all right, Minnesota Army National Guard, how many amputees do we have? And they were we have 7 guys in the whole, the whole thing. And they're scattered all over Minnesota. And I think they said one guy is in Wisconsin and,
Texas. And
or I think it was 7 or 8, total that they were that had served that were amputees. Well, so then I go down to the Minneapolis VA, and they have a spinal cord center, and they work pretty closely with Paralyzed Veterans of America. And I got a contact over with their clinic, and I'm kind of asking them hey, how here's what we're cooking. I'm down there basically pitching it to them, here's what we're doing, and how many guys do you have that would be interested in this? And it just didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
Honestly, because it's okay, think about it. How many younger guys, able-bodied, that meet that criteria, that live in Minnesota, that are concentrated in the city, are going to and then on top of that, the ones that would actually be interested in this, like you've whittled it down to maybe like what, like one or two guys might be interested in coming out and trying it.
Yeah.
Well, we can't. Here's the issue: we can't build a program like that. Like we're not. We To make a long story short, we realized right there, existentialistic kind of exclamation point, like question, crisis, whatever. Like we're not probably going to look like the guys down at Walter Reed.
No.
But let me tell you what we did have in Minnesota. We had a lot of guys like me, because keep in mind, I'm not an amputee. I didn't lose an arm. I didn't lose a leg. I mean, I was badly injured. Yes. Okay. Traumatic brain injury, and I had my leg issues, and I had all the things. But I am able. I would be considered able-bodied. Okay. And but let me tell you what we did have in Minnesota. We had a brigade combat team that had deployed and redeployed back to their homes in Minnesota, who maybe they didn't lose arms, maybe they didn't lose legs, maybe they're not amputees, they're not maybe they
not
maybe
like even a Purple Heart recipient. Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you this: they were having a lot of guys were having a hell of a time trying to like come back home after
and readjust. Yeah,
basically 2-year deployment.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, let's talk about substance abuse issues. Let's talk about rates of divorce. Let's talk about coming back to work after that. Like, let's talk about all these different things and feeling, because, something that I have said for many years now, I should almost like monetize this phrase, is that the bottom line is that you don't have to be physically wounded or injured, and you don't have to have PTSD to simply be away from your family and be out of your community and then come back and feel like you don't belong after what you experienced. PTSD and combat injuries and even an exposure to combat conditions at all, that's not a prerequisite to feel like I don't fit here. I don't have a sense of meaning and purpose. So while it is the case that in Minnesota in 2010, we didn't have that concentration of like what they had at Walter Reed, we did have a concentration of folks that were going to benefit from the locker room.
Yeah.
That's what we had. Well, here's why that's important. I think Warrior hockey, as you see it today, think of it like a genetic mutation almost. You know how if you have a plant at home and it just like starts growing in a certain way, like towards the sunlight.
Yep.
Or it adapts kind of, or like it's, call it a genetic mutation within the history of Warriors hockey. The program model for Warriors hockey permanently changed in Minnesota because we didn't. And here's what's relevant about that is when we took the ice. So we took the ice with 4 members. I think we had 2 Purple Heart recipients, and one had been injured, and one was like had a service-connected disability rating for PTSD, that type of thing. Well, we didn't, because let me recap. We didn't have the amputees. I think we realized we weren't going to look like the guys at Walter Reed. So it grew by word of mouth. I mean, my brother Dave was one of those participants.
Yep.
Or Gabe Thomas had gotten a Purple Heart. He'd been injured in Iraq. Got a Purple Heart. And then his friend, Pete Hansen, was a wounded Marine veteran. Okay. That's how the program started. Literally 4 guys without any equipment taking the ice. So we, between March of 2010 and November, we pounded the pavement. We marketed the program. We went out and we talked to people about what we were doing. I had to be willing to pick up the phone and talk to anybody that would listen. I had, Tony calling me. I had Loretta calling me. Hey, I need you here. I need you, like, drop what you're doing. Get here. There's a meeting happening here, or there's an Am Legion meeting happening here, or there's, something happening in the community. I'm out there trying to like pitch this to people I've never even met before. Yeah. I am out there talking to hustling and talking to anybody that'll listen, anybody that can give us equipment, anybody that can donate money. I got a call. I think it was like, it was like August, September timeframe of 2010. Loretta calls me. Hey, I need you at the Vadnais Heights Commons for they're having an economic development meeting there. I got you on the agenda. I show up there and I'm like, I don't even know who I'm looking for. I just like, I'm literally like wandering around, like talking to people like, hey, I'm Andy Qualy. Hey, I'm Andy Qualy. Hey, Minnesota Warriors. Hey, they told me that I'm supposed to speak here or, talk about the program here. Finally, a guy named Keith Warner, who was on the Vadnais Heights economic development, like he's like, oh yeah. I talked to Lorette. Okay, we made that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was important because that got our foot in the door for some donated ice time at the new Vadnais Heights Sports Center.
Nice.
Okay, and there was I think it was apt our timing versus their timing. We got donated ice time from the Vadnais Heights Sports Center. Here's what I'll tell you about that situation. There was a lot of political opposition to the building of that facility. It was privately owned. A lot of the rinks in Minnesota are municipal. In other words, they're not money-making entities. Very few ice arenas in Minnesota make money. Okay. Anyway, so we took the ice in November of 2010, and from there it just kind of grew by word of mouth. And what we ended up with was not amputee. I mean, we actually did have one amputee who was already connected to USA Disabled Hockey, a guy by the name of Pete Staley.
Yeah, Pete.
Yeah, you know Pete.
Yep.
Was the only actual standing amputee guy that we had. So we're out there kind of trying to pitch this. Initially, at least, kind of like disabled hockey. We got amputees. We got this whole thing. Well, we really only had one, and it was Pete. But all these other guys had, remember, I mean, like, they signed the dotted line. They had been deployed. They had been injured. It just, the fundamental shift that took place in Minnesota as opposed to the USA Warriors is that I honestly think that at the most foundational level of our program emphasis, we changed the game in Minnesota. Okay. Yeah. And what I'm going to tell you guys right now is very simply this. USA Hockey was, and specifically USA Disabled Hockey, was ready for the USA Warriors. They were on board with that. They fit the narrative and they fit the profile of what I think USA Disabled Hockey was intended to be. Okay. And what do I mean by that? The sled hockey, the amputees, the ones with like very significant limiting physical disabilities.
Yeah.
Well, when we Minnesota Warriors kind of burst onto the scene as a subsidiary of the USA Warriors hockey program in 2010 and into 2011. So it just so happened that the USA Disabled Hockey Festival was taking place at the Blaine Super Rink, or the Super Rink in Blaine, in spring of 2011. When we took and we had our program out there, and by that time I think we had grown to like 12 members or something like that. And again, who are they? Disabled veterans. Mm-hmm. They're guys with VA service connections, and they're guys with you had some guy, a few guys with Purple Hearts. And we had the one amputee, right? But when I honestly think that like the perception of Minnesota when we showed up and took the ice there, it's like, well, you guys don't really look like these guys over here. It was kind of like USA Disabled Hockey's looking at us like, well, I thought we were doing disabled hockey. You guys look normal.
Yeah.
And I think that's relevant. I think it's significant because that's where you started to kind of see. So I think a rift started to kind of develop between.
Did they say, hey, we need more teams of your caliber that may not have the significant injuries, but, they still have injuries, PTSD,
Well, I think it's really kind of that existentialistic question of, okay, do we want to grow this program model and make it big? The way that Drew and I, going all the way back to 2009, we're talking about like this could be a thing that because again, the idea is that when these folks who have had such a positive experience coming through Walter Reed with the USA Warriors, well, what if they get back to Minnesota and now there's nothing for them?
Yeah.
you know, or, you know, other, I mean, just like other areas of the country, because this program, the thing is this program model didn't exist. Nobody really knew what they were doing. Okay. We didn't know what we had our hands on. We didn't know. I mean,
You're really just shooting from the hip, really.
Yeah. Like I don't know what this is, but we were pitching it as disabled hockey, emulating what they were doing in the USA Warriors. But by 2011, it was very evident that that's not really, this genetic mutation had kind of already taken off, and that's not really what was happening, and that's not really the demographic. And so
I think where Larry sort of started coming in the picture?
In 2011, yes, and hold that thought, because that's going to become very relevant too. That's going to, we're going to get there, because that's a whole thing. But I think by 2011, that's just where it was at, is that we've got USA Warriors and we've got Minnesota Warriors. So you have two Warrior teams. Not coincidentally, Drew's in Washington, D.C. running and doing the program down at Walter Reed, and you got Qualy, me, in Minnesota doing it now, by 2010, 2011. It was an exciting whirlwind time for Warrior hockey for that exact reason, what you just said, Nick. We're shooting from the hip. We couldn't see past next month.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, do we have ambitions of making this huge? Well, I think it was kind of like, yeah, maybe, sort of. I don't know how we're going to do it. So I think, but I think what's relevant is that, at the most fundamental level, going all the way back to those initial discussions in 2006, where we had Ann Moore involved, and we're talking about hockey as like recreation therapy, or like a physical healing tool. What fundamentally changed in Minnesota is that was no longer the emphasis. I'm not going to say it wasn't an emphasis, but it wasn't the emphasis. The emphasis was in the locker room. The emphasis became camaraderie. The emphasis became mental health and well-being and being a part of a family. That's where it shifted. And I think that if we understand why Warrior hockey, or why or how Warrior hockey exists, what I just said right there, that's the first reason, is that fundamental kind of genetic mutation took place in Minnesota. That's how the rest of the program under USA Hockey over the years, as it grew, that's where we caught fire. That's where we found the demand. Mm-hmm. How many amputees do I have in St. Louis? How many amputees do I have in Philadelphia? How many amputees do I have down in Florida? How many do I have in Michigan? I don't know. But I'll tell you what we do have is we have a lot of veterans that have really latched onto this because they're looking for something bigger than themselves.
Yeah,
that's what we did know. Now let's talk about the Hendrickson Foundation.
Let's do it.
Because as it would happen,
Larry forces, the legend.
Yeah, call it forces in the universe. But I would say this was sometime in the summer of 2011. So the Minnesota Warriors have been in existence a little over a year, and we are financially fledgling. Let's be honest. Yeah, we had a few donations, and we had kind of this Am Legion, or this, we're getting $100.
Was it teetering? You're getting more guys, but the money is not catching up. So
the growth and demand of the program is getting like it's like here's consistently through the program's history, the finances always kind of got dragged behind the truck of growth and demand of like, I want this, I want the program. So financially, it's always kind of been like a struggle, which is why I had to learn how to, get over my own antisocial tendencies and become a hustler. I'm just going to say it. Like I had to be willing to get bold and ask for what we needed and talk to people that I didn't know, almost on it, like all the time. Everything became about raising money for the program. Okay. So I get a call in this, I think it was It was Tony called me up in summer of 2011 and said, "Hey, here's the deal. We might have a big opportunity here. I don't know, but I need you to get down. I need you. I need you to get. I need you to get down to the next sled." So there was a Minnesota. There was a sled program under USA Disabled Hockey called the Minnesota Northern. They were playing out of Richfield. Okay. And she told me, I need you to get down to their next practice. There's somebody that I need you to meet and talk to. Well, that somebody was a guy by the name of Larry Hendrickson. And I'm kind of like, why do I know that name? Well, so for all the hockey fans in Minnesota, you would recognize Larry Hendrickson. A couple of reasons. Number one, Darby and Danny are his sons. Darby obviously had a very successful NHL career.
Yeah.
Both of his kids actually played for the Gophers. Larry Hendrickson also was a very, very well-known high school hockey coach in Minnesota, actually. And
he knew her Brooks pretty well as well.
What's that?
It said he knew Herbie pretty good as well. Herb Brooks.
Well, he actually was very well connected in the Minnesota hockey community. Here's a fun fact about Larry. Actually, Larry was brought in by Herb Brooks to be one of the strength and conditioning coaches, both for the 1980 U.S. Olympic team and for the North Stars. So Larry was like, he was like a bodybuilder, like he was a well-known like strength guy. Larry I know for a fact Larry had played hockey at Washburn High School in Minneapolis through high school, and I know he played on a couple of state tournament teams. I don't know. Don't hold me to this. I don't know what his playing career in hockey after high school was like, but what I do know is that he became very influential and very well connected in Minnesota hockey. Well, so he was in the process of he was getting on in years, right? And he was out of the coaching game a little bit. I don't think he coached after like 2005, 2006 time frame in the Minnesota State High School League or something like that. So he's starting a foundation. Okay. And if you listen to if you go to the Hendrickson Foundation events, or you go to their hockey festival, or you look at the material that they have online, hear
Danny's got a hat on right now, actually.
Yeah, you hear that origin story, like, hey, this was about Larry's legacy. Yep. He was looking to start, the way I would describe it is, I'm getting out of the coaching game. It's too much for me. I'm getting on in years, but I want to do something in Minnesota hockey. Well, I want to start a foundation because that's, an easy way to, fund and support, hockey players in Minnesota. But they were struggling at the time. So this was taking place about the same time. Again, forces in the universe. This was taking place around the same time that we were getting ours going, the Minnesota Warriors. And I think for the Hendrickson Foundation, they kind of started off with, well, I want to support elite hockey players, and we want to get behind and sponsor the high perform, the CCM high performance leagues, and somehow do that. Okay. Well, then what happened was that Larry got introduced to these sled hockey, some of the guys from Minnesota Northern, and specifically a guy by the name of Mike Seeger, who I got to know. Actually, they were sled hockey players with the Minnesota Northern. Larry got kind of introduced to disabled hockey and started going out to their practices. This, again, we're talking 2009, 2010, 2011 timeframe. Larry's going out to the Minnesota Northern practices, okay? Learns about what they're doing, learns about disabled hockey. Okay, well, enter Minnesota Warriors, because we were the newest member underneath that umbrella of disabled hockey in Minnesota, right? Okay. Yeah. So Tony's calling me summer of 2011. You got to get out to the Northern practice, and you got to meet this guy. Oh, okay. And so I go down there. This is at Richfield Ice Arena, Ring 2. They're out there, doing their thing. And Tony's down there, and she's going to introduce me, whatever. Okay, all right. So the first thing that happened was that Larry was he was down on their bench coaching them, like not really. He's not really the coach. They had somebody on the ice, but he's coaching them. He's coaching the sled players. He's down on the bench, and he's pointing, and he's doing this, and he's move, 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 So he's so Tony brings me over, and he introduces me, and he can't really get a word in edgewise with him because he's trying to coach the team, and he was really, really focused on that. So he was kind of yeah, hey, let's talk after. He was really he was really dialed into what was happening on the ice at the time or whatever.
Oh, so you're kind of just standing there all
yeah. It was honestly kind of I don't know what to I don't know what to do. Yeah. So I kind of started this, I was kind of standing on the bench or whatever, and finally, they get done with the practice, and then he's all right, walk with me. Okay, all right. So so we're taking a walk, and for those that knew Larry, the way it goes is that he will talk and you will listen.
Yeah.
And if you happen to get a word in edgewise, great. Okay. And what stuck out to me is that I came away from that initial meeting with a strong impression that I think at that time in 2011, the Hendrickson Foundation, as it was getting underway, they had made their decision. It was very evident to me that Larry told me, he's I'm getting behind this. I am getting behind this out here, sled hockey. What are you guys doing? And he did not, here's what I'm going to say. He didn't immediately latch on to this idea that well, okay, you're a bunch of guys. Oh, hang on. You're military veterans? Oh, okay. Now I've got his attention. Okay. So what are you guys doing? Well, okay. So I'm kind of giving him the standard elevator speech or whatever that I'm out giving everybody else. And he's kind of well, wait a minute. How often do you practice? When do you skate? How do you, and then he was well, how do you skate? Do you skate like these guys? No, we're standing up. And one of his questions was well, so how are you different from anybody else?
Yeah.
That's
why you give him a locker room speech.
You know what I told him? I told him, come to our next practice. I'll show you.
Yeah.
So, because by the summer of 2011, our constituency or our membership in the Minnesota Warriors had grown to 20. And then what happened was through the help of Tony and the others, we started having people from USA Hockey coming out and running our practices. So I've got one guy by the name of Rick Lowe. Rick Lowe was coming out to our practices regularly.
Yeah.
And we weren't just skating. We weren't just a bunch of guys. We had USA Hockey jerseys on, and we were running ADM practices, which that's USA Hockey's American, that stands for American Development Model. Mm-hmm. Okay. The American Development Model. These are practices, specific training and practicing techniques that were being employed by USA Hockey. So a guy by the name of Rick Lowe got referred to us. He was coming out in his USA Hockey jumpsuit and all, and running ADM practices. So we're out there doing the skating drills and doing the passing drills. And we're out there shooting softballs and tennis balls around, and we're doing drills, and it was very regimented, and it was very organized. And Larry did come to one of our practices, and I think that when he saw what we were doing, that hey, this isn't just adult hockey; these are disabled athletes Okay. And I think his big question at the time was, well, so if you're standing and these guys over here are doing sled hockey and we've got the USA Warriors down here and they're amputees and all this, so what? It kind of begs that fundamental question about, so why is this different? Well, it's what made us a part of disabled hockey is that number one, to stay underneath that USA Hockey disabled hockey umbrella, we had a set of we kind of put into play and proposed an eligibility criteria. Well, what was that? Okay, well, to be a part of us, wounded, injured, or otherwise disabled veterans, that started in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
That was not the USA Warriors.
Correct.
That was us.
Yeah.
That was us. That was me. That was us. Wounded, injured, or otherwise disabled veterans. Okay. The otherwise disabled veterans aspect was kind of more ambiguous. Like, okay, you had an injury, you have PTSD, you have a service-connected rating, you have, that type of thing. And that's essentially how we made the program model a part of that disabled hockey umbrella, because and that was really important for us at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because the direction that Hendrickson latched onto us. He loved us after that first practice. He came out, watched us practice. He was hooked. He came out to more practices. I'll never forget, we had an event down in Chaska with the NHL alumni. That was our 11-11-11 game. I actually I'm gonna turn my camera in my office. I still have a flyer. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a wall of fame, actually. You can kind of see that.
Oh, that's
great.
But that 11-11-11 game, okay, that was one of the funnest and best events that we ever did as an organization. And Larry was there. Darby actually played in it. Nice. Larry was there. And I if I had to point to one thing that really got him on board with us, two things. Number one, it's what we were doing at the time, the organization, the work. They weren't looking to just support a beer league team or support a bunch of guys.
Right.
He wanted to know, why is this different? Why is this why are you disabled hockey, and how does it compare with what these athletes over here are doing? Well, I think therein lies the rub. Therein lies the question. It's that we are conducting ourselves like athletes. We show up and we are here to work. This is not like, I don't want beer in my damn locker room. Okay. Like, we are here to work, and we are here to work together, and we are here to adapt the program and the program model to the level and ability of the participating athletes, as is outlined not only in our charter, but USA Disabled Hockey, okay? Because we have folks coming in with highly varying skill levels. Well, you got a guy like me that played through high school or whatever, beyond high school, whatever, okay. Fine. But, we had folks coming in. Well, yeah, they're disabled veterans. They have a tough time just standing up on their skates.
Yeah.
Well, that's the range that we're dealing with here. So what Larry saw was, he saw a group of athletes on a team coming together and working to improve, and having the camaraderie in the dressing room that goes along with that. I think in the process, which became a key component, of course, of what we were pitching to our donors, specifically that. But I think what's really important, again, is that we got a guy with some real pull. I would say Larry Hendrickson and the Hendrickson Foundation was the first real heavy hitting sponsor that we had coming in saying, we want to get behind this.
Yeah.
The reason I think that you see the eligibility criteria as it is right now, it goes all the way back to 2010 in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. That's why wounded, injured, otherwise disabled veterans. Correct. That's what came in underneath USA Hockey, under Warrior Hockey, under disabled hockey, right? Okay. But I'm going to be straight with you. When I saw that, I got Larry was calling me up every week. I would spend hours on the phone with the guy. he would call me up and say, hey, get over here. We got to talk. Okay, well, let's talk. And it was him talking.
Yeah.
Okay. But he just really latched on to what we were doing for those reasons. He could tangibly come out and see that we weren't just another adult hockey group. We're not just the bar league. Right. Like, we are disabled athletes, and that's what the Hendrickson Foundation was and still is chartered to support underneath USA Disabled Hockey, or I should say Minnesota Disabled Hockey. Okay. Well, yeah. So we had a motive to be under that umbrella. We want to be a part of the family to get that funding. Okay. And I think that's really, really key and relevant, because it was Larry Hendrick. So I got to tell this story. It was 2012. He calls me up and he calls me up and he says, hey, I'm out by my pool. Come have a beer. Okay. Well, so for Larry, that was like 4, but okay. It's neither here nor there. Okay.
Come back to the wood shack.
Yeah. And it's just the two of us there. And he's like, look, I want to talk to you about let's, they had been cutting us checks, and that's when I think the Hendrickson Foundation was the game changer for the financial and for not only the financial future, but the growth of Minnesota Warriors hockey. Because keep in mind, I had no idea what I was doing in 2010 or 2011. That program could have freaking disappeared. Ask me if I thought about, oh man, what's our 5-year business plan? Oh man, what's the is this program going to be here in 10 years? And if so, who's going to be in it? Oh my gosh, guys, I was clueless. I had no, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm trying to plan our next practice.
Get money, build the program.
Yeah. I can't think past next week, Larry. Okay. But so I go to his house and it's just the two of us, and, we're sitting there and, on his deck or whatever, and we're having a beer, and he normally didn't, when I would interact with him, he was just excited about the program, and he just wanted to know, hey, what are you guys doing next? This was different. This meeting was different. He's calling me and he's taking his time out of his day to invite me over to his house in his backyard, just the two of us. And he grilled me with some some kind of serious questions at that time about hey, what's the future of this program? Where do you want this to go? How do you see this? And that's really important, because it was Larry Hendrickson was the first one. He was the first one who submitted for my awareness and my consideration that, hey, this could get huge, because he told me at literally, it's I think it was the spring or summer of 2012. He was the first one that told me, you don't know what you started. He said that you don't know what you have started. He was the one that was telling me, this is going to get big. You don't see it yet. You don't realize it yet. This is going to get big, and we want to make it big. We want to help you make it big. Well, I left that meeting scared shitless, honestly. Seriously, my head's going to explode. All the stuff he's talking about. I'm just because why am I scared? Why am I freaking out? Well, I don't know how I'm going to make my bottom line next month. I don't know how I'm going to fund my next trip. I don't know how, I haven't even processed the new player applications that we got last week. That's where my mind is. And he's over here talking about, you're going to make this big. We're going to make this big. We're going to help you do it. My mind couldn't quite, conceptualize that. But I think if you look back at it retrospectively, Larry had a funny way of always kind of being proven right over the course of time.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. He calls me up. I think it was the fall of 2012. Same kind of thing. Hey, get over here. I'm having a beer, whatever. We got to talk. That's how
get back in my office.
Yeah.
In the office.
Well, and you don't say
Yeah,
I'm
you
the
don't
kind of
say
guy,
no. Yeah.
I'm a hustler. Like that's my
Yeah.
biggest donor. When he says
Yeah.
jump, I say how high. I'm not even going to ask questions.
Yeah.
If he says get here, get here. You know, that's how it was. Okay. But you know, he told me like, hey, listen, you got to safeguard this program. You're going to have to safeguard this program. Why? He said, listen to me. You are going to have he said, people are going to come to this program. They're going to come into it and they're going to get into it for the wrong reasons. And they're going to want to, they're going to drag it. They're going to potentially drag it down. I don't want to see that happen. How do we safeguard the program? He was a huge proponent of you guys, you have to do like, number one, his big thing is you got to show gratitude to the people that help you. And you still hear that around the foundation. Mm-hmm. The Hendrickson Foundation, a foundation of the Hendrickson Foundation, is that of gratitude. Okay. Yeah. The virtue, I think it's gratitude as a virtue.
Yeah.
Okay. But also I think, you know, he wanted people to know what his foundation was out in the community doing. Make no mistake about it. I had always had the impression that in addition to his passion, he was concerned about his legacy. He knew maybe that he wasn't in, you know, the greatest health. He had a heart condition. You know, there were some challenges there, and you know, I think that, you know, his legacy and his place in Minnesota hockey history and, you know, within the hockey community. I mean, he wanted to do something good, but he wanted people to know that. I mean, if you wanted people to know about his legacy, what was his legacy? He was the epitome of hockey in Minnesota. I love the game of hockey, and he stepped up to the plate to support a growing demographic of hockey in Minnesota, specifically that being disabled athletes. Hockey is, you know, so hockey is for everyone. That became their battle cry. That became their mantra. That became their whole thing. And that went for us, the Minnesota Warriors. And I mean, I would honestly say I had a very special relationship with Larry. He became a mentor to me personally. You know, he said, you know, things like, hey, you got to safeguard the program. We want to help you do that because you're going to get people in here for the wrong reasons who don't understand what you're doing. He said that happens in just about every hockey association across the entire state. People come in and they want to make the program, the way he put it was, they want to make the program about themselves and not themselves about the program. That's verbatim the way that he.
And and you know, at this point, unfortunately, there's some programs out there that's the way it is. And and I do want to say about mentors, how it trickles down, because in many ways you are somewhat of a mentor to me. I wouldn't have been able to build the program down here like I have without guys like you and all the guys that I've met throughout my tenure that I've been doing this. And with even the guys I met out here, like Austin, who's just kind of he grinds out in a sort of officer tone, but he's that guy that wants that 5-year goal too. You know, hey, what are we doing next year? What are our goals? Where are we coming up with money? And we're new, so we don't have the biggest squad, but I feel like we already have an identity. And what I tell my guys, we build in the locker room. When you come to our team, we give you that uniform. We give you sort of your identity back, so to speak, because I know how it is. Even if you've never deployed, if you do, you know, however long on active duty, you've still been through the challenges, leaving that identity hanging it up, so to speak. It's hard. Even if talk to some of these old NHL alumni, they can compare to that, hanging the skates up. It's not easy.
Right.
So where do you see, how do you want to see this? Because obviously right now we're well over 70 teams, I want to say, throughout the nation. I mean, it's got to be pushing 100 even maybe. It's big, like he's
right.
Like he said.
Yeah, yeah. But that was, I mean, yeah. First of all, I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, It makes me happy to see you guys succeeding the way, and building it the way, the way that you guys are, and but I think if, again, to kind of sort of reemphasize, is that everything or a lot of what I know or what I learned came from Larry.
Yeah.
And the nuggets, the golden nuggets that he would throw me, on a consistent basis, of just like philosophy, or just like knowledge, or like,
Yeah.
the things like that. Like, number one, you got to, things like that. Like, hey, people are going to come to this program and they're going to make the program about themselves and not themselves about the program. Okay. That was a big Larryism, if you want to call it that. That was the big thing that he pushed, is that you don't come here and make the program about yourself. You make yourself about the program. Okay. That's one example. Another one was that, this one time, I got to tell this quick story. So, again, it's another pool meeting. Okay, I'm at his house, and I'm in there. I'm in there. Why? I'm trying to remember. I can't remember how we got on this, but I'm in there whining and crying, and I'm complaining about, oh, I'm so put upon, and nobody cares, and the guys aren't showing up to this, and they're not doing that, and he's carrying on, and something that he kind of listened to me go on for a second, and he finally stopped me, and he's like,
He let you
Andy.
talk.
Yeah, he's like, Andy, you gotta learn how to be grateful for what you do get from people, and not like bitter and grumpy about what you don't get.
That's true.
Okay. Well, that was another example of, like, okay, like he was absolutely right. It's like, okay, because he's watching me get all spun up about, like, okay, the day-to-day operations of this program, and where are we going to get the money, where are we going to get the ice time, and so and so's not doing this, and we haven't seen so and so for practice in a month, and we have, we got an upcoming trip, or we got some event going on, all this kind of stuff. It's how easy is it to get all spun up on that and lose sight of the why. It's like, you know what, honestly, like you catch, I think what he was getting at is, like, you catch more bees with honey. You gotta, but I think he was talking about, and referring to specifically, like a fundamental shift in attitude on my part. Like, you can't control what other people have going on in their life, and that's, I mean, that's something that he said is, look, you don't know what they got going on. Sure. So you're over here having a having a meltdown, or you're carrying on about what people aren't doing. Well, suggestion: you might pick up the phone and call them and find out what's going on. Be their friend, in other words.
That's part of the program too. I mean, it's like the Army. You gotta have battle buddy. You gotta be able to check on your brothers and your people, like, in the program. So
right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I've kind of talked exhaustively about, like, okay, here's the origin of the program, and we kind of walked through everything. I guess I kind of want to make sure that, if there's, Danny, if there's questions, maybe that we didn't get to, or if, like, if there's stuff that kind of got left off the list that we maybe get to here.
Well, like one question, like, when you look back at the early days, did you ever envision the program growing to this scale?
Yeah, kind of like I think I kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think I should clarify that. No, it's a loaded question, and I'll tell you why. What I guess the way I would answer, well,
no, I know.
I have to kind of chuckle, because it's like,
no, my instructor would be like, that's a double-barreled question.
Yeah, but yes. The answer to your question is yes and no. Now, why do I say that? Well, at the time that we got it started, I can't sit here and tell you that, no, I didn't think of that, or that it wasn't a thought, or that it wasn't an idea. But what I found is that the more I got kind of into getting the Minnesota group up off the ground and in flight, it became more of a back burner thing. it had between Drew and I been talked about going all the way back to like our initial discussions in 2009 as they were getting their program going. Okay. There was a dream and there was an idea that, hey, we could like expand this so that our guys have somewhere to go once they're done at Walter Reed, like with their rehab or whatever. But as I got into, the program in Minnesota and all that, it just became like this sidebar thing. And then it was when the Hendrickson Foundation, again, I cannot understate the role of the Hendrickson Foundation, not only in supporting the Minnesota group, but they became, through some of their partnerships, specifically, Nick will be familiar with the Yachts Valor Foundation, which was a different entity, but the Hendrickson Foundation became a partner with the Yachts Valor Foundation. To kind of fast forward into the mid to late 2010s, that's when the Yachts Valor Foundation was handing out $5,000 grants to upstart programs around the country. We have Larry Hendrickson to thank for that partnership. We have the Hendrickson Foundation to thank for kind of pushing that. And also, there were folks in the Minnesota Warriors who were instrumental. One shout out I would have to give is Tim Loney. Tim Loney that became so Tim Loney came to the program and got onto the board around like 2013. So fairly early on in the program, not right at the start. Mm-hmm. Another guy is a guy that you guys probably know well, a guy by the name of Barry Ford. Okay. Yep. Between Barry and between Tim, like the expansion of this program model in like across the country became of particular importance thanks to, I specifically have to mention those two guys.
Sure.
Barry in particular, I think Barry came in, again, he was another Minnesota hockey connection, but he came in about 2011 with another guy by the name of Mike Morris, who was like, helping to coach the team. But Barry took on a board role even with the Minnesota Warriors. And I think, I'm pretty sure that Barry was pretty familiar with Larry. They had they I don't know exactly what their relationship was, but through Minnesota hockey, Barry definitely knew who Larry was, and I think that helped us too.
Yeah.
But Barry was another one pushing and guiding us and making sure that we didn't lose sight of this is about helping fellow veterans. This is really important that this program exists. While Qualy's out there, full of piss and vinegar, wanting to, win tournaments and win championships and show up to the rink and have practice and train hard and push guys. Barry was that voice, kind of like, hey, yeah, that's great, but remember what this is.
Yeah.
Here's a quick Barry story for you, actually.
He lives down here, right? He lives sort of by me out here in Central Florida.
Yeah, I know he moved down there a number of years ago, but this was before that. Yep. He was coaching us actually at the Disabled Hockey Festival in Tampa in 2019. I think it was 2018 or 2019. I think
2019, right? What? Yeah, maybe it was 2018.
I can't. It was one of those 2 years. Yeah. I'll have to double check. Yeah. But so he's coaching us on the bench, and we had for the A bracket or whatever in that tournament, we had a good team. I thought
you almost lost some chitlets in that.
Yeah.
I have a picture of you definitely spitting some blood out of your mouth, and you're like, look, guys, let's get our head back in the game. Let's go.
Yeah. Which, if you think about it, that's like nuts. But okay. But so we're playing the team out of Dallas. The Dallas, I think it was the Dallas Warriors.
Yeah. The Lone Star one, yeah.
We're beating them it's 8-0 in the third period. And I come over to the bench on a timeout, or it was like a whistle stoppage or something. I come over to the bench, and Barry's on the bench coaching us or whatever. And I go, guys, we can't let off the gas pedal, because we had our team from Duluth, who also had a pretty solid team in that tournament also, because we had by that time expanded up to Duluth. I think that took place in about 2016, was our Minnesota's first expansion to Duluth.
Duluth, yep.
Well, they had a pretty good A team down there too, and so we're worried about like goal differential or something like that. And Barry's losing his mind with me, which he should have.
Yeah,
he should have, because it's like he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? Goal differential? Like, you guys haven't lost. You just beat Buffalo 10-1, I think it was, or something like that. And it's like, what are we doing here? He was, so my point is and by the way, Barry was absolutely correct. And as I look back at that, it's actually kind of like, to be honest with you, I'm actually kind of embarrassed.
yeah.
What is that about? You know, but Barry was always kind of that guiding force about, like the mission and the spirit behind what we're doing. So what? This is because I think his take on it, and he would tell you this. Well, these are your fellow veterans. Are you like are you here to like beat them down, kick them while they're down, or like what is that about? What's so important about goal differential? What's so important about winning? I think that's you know and as we look at where the program model has come with, like you said, Nick, the number of teams and the number of groups that claim to be warrior programs or are identified, I should say not claim, but that are identified as warrior programs. And now we're having these national tournaments and we're having these warrior classics and we're having all these things, which is great. That's great for the program. And we've got the Hendrickson Foundation Festival tournament, and St. Louis has a tournament that's gained a lot of traction. And
yeah,
great like there's events happening around the country for this program model, which is awesome. But even since I have when I was in Minnesota, okay, with the program there, we won these national tournaments and we were the champions. And you probably recall, like, Minnesota Warriors white team. It's like, people knew that like we were the team to that like, okay, this is a winning team and all that. And that was at the time really important for us. But one of the things I would say is that, yeah, we won all those championships. I think when I was in Minnesota, we won like 7 tournament championships. 3 of them were national tournaments. We won a Minnesota Armed Forces tournament one year. We won a walleye chop tournament up there in Blaine one year. We won, some of these different kinds of things. What I have learned over that time is that, to be honest with you, I can't remember those games. I can't remember how many goals I scored. I can't, like, it wasn't really about winning the championships as much as it was. What I do remember is that we worked hard together.
Yeah.
And I remember the guys that we had on every single one of those teams. And I remember what we had in the dressing room, and I remember what it felt like. That's what's important. And so, something that I had even brought up as I spoke in front of the group back in May at the most recent tournament was like, look, there are 2 schools of thought about how the program helps its participants and what the emphasis should be. And I can't say that both or either of them are wrong. Okay. But it's like, okay, if you come out and you win championships and you win banners, great. What does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah. Well, I think my question would be is, okay, if we say that the program helps its participants, right, then the question is how? How does it help? And I think, okay, if you're all about winning championships, what I want to know more than anything, and I think Larry, going all the way back to Larry Hendrickson, I think he would ask the question, listen, that's great, but did it help you become a better version of yourself? In other words, did you have to work for it? Did you have to make lifestyle changes and sacrifices to be at the top? Did you have to show up and work together with your teammates? Okay. I think that's what's important about if we're going to say that winning should be an emphasis. Well, we want you to be successful, sure. But I think, going again all the way back to the early days and Larry and him being a mentor, I think that's what he would want to know is It's not, I don't care how many trophies you won. I don't even know where those banners and trophies are. Okay. It's not about that. I don't want to say nobody cares, but did it help you and drive you to be a better version of yourself? Did you have to eat healthier? Did you have to get into a gym? Did you have to sleep better? Did you have to get to practice? Did you have to make some sacrifices? were you a better version of yourself? Or was it just party time?
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, because I think the other school of thought is that, you know what, we served our time and we had the intensity of deployments, and that we want someplace like our conceptualization of a therapeutic experience is a place to come and relax and kind of let loose and be a part of the guys and have a beer, and we don't care about winning. Well, here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and say that's wrong either. And I think Larry would have told you that, and I think Barry Ford would tell you that too. That's not wrong.
Barry's philosophy is beers after the game, boys.
Well, and that's so, and interestingly enough, yes. I mean, that goes all the way back to my philosophy in Minnesota. That was a huge boundary that I had with my guys. It's like, listen, we have to be able to, we have to be able to articulate to donors and people in the community about why we're different than the bar league or the regular adult hockey.
Yeah.
I don't want it in my locker room. That's it. We are here to work and get better and be athletes. There is nothing wrong with going out in the parking lot afterward or going to the bar afterward, after you have done your work. I think it's very important to have that distinction. It's like, it's okay to do that for the guys that want to do that. However, you know, one thing that I have to say is that there's been a lot of positive outcomes, and people will tell you, and the number of people I've even had come up to me and say, hey, thanks for doing this. This saved my life. And I am fascinated by that. I am absolutely fascinated by that, because I want to know why, though. How did it save your life? Now, one thing that I would add to that is that there are people who have come to the program and had their lives ruined.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. I hate to say that. Now, here's one quick story, anecdotally, that I'll offer is that we were on when I was in Minnesota still in 2017, we had a road trip up to Detroit Lakes for an exhibition game, and it was part of a fundraiser. We were going to get some donations and money out of that. And it was particularly important to me that we were up there and a part of that. And the reason is because it wasn't just about the money, it was about marketing. We were looking to expand. I think at that time in the program's history, because we had a successful launch in Duluth, we wanted to take that and say, hey, look, we want to market this program outstate because we want to gain some traction to expand it. So we go up there. This was the summer of 2017. We go up there for an exhibition game, and we had a guy on the team who, he was an active duty Army guy. He had multiple deployments, and he came back and he had some real struggles with alcohol and psychiatric concerns, PTSD. Yeah. It was a fragile, delicate situation, and he had a history of struggling with alcohol, and it got him into trouble, and there was legal problems there. Well, he came on this trip, and I knew at that time that he was taking some meds, through the VA for some sleep stuff and for some PTSD stuff, and I think depression, anxiety, and it wasn't going to interact well with alcohol. Okay. So we had I had pulled him aside and I had talked to him, and I said, hey, look, we'd love to have you on this trip, but I want to make sure that because we're all probably going to go out after this game. Detroit Lakes in the summer is a fun place. You got Zorba's, you got some of the bars and stuff down there. Okay. And so we had this plan where one of the other guys on the team who was also trying to stay sober, hey, the two of us are going to go back to the hotel after the game. We're not going to go out. We're not going to get crazy. We're not, we'll go have dinner with you guys, but then we're out of here after that.
Sure.
And it degenerated because they got it. It sounds like they got into the alcohol at the hotel bar. So we're out at Zorba's at 1 a.m. And sure enough, he shows up. Both of them showed up, and I bet he wasn't there 20 minutes. He's into a full blown bar fight, with somebody at the bar, and there's he lost his mind. And this guy could fight. I'm going to tell you right now, maybe not the most talented hockey player, but don't fight him. I'll tell you that. Because he boxed, and stuff. Like no,
Sure.
this is going to be a bad deal. And he's not what you call a small guy either, but like, okay, it's like he's got like three of the bouncers, like basically like he's fighting all of them, and they like had to like drag, like we got involved and we tried to like,
Drag him
calm
off.
him down, and like, he's kicking and screaming. He finally gets thrown out of the bar, and there's four sheriff's deputies. It took four sheriff's deputies to get him into the back of their squad, and they're just like they had to rough his ass up. Okay, like he had totally lost his mind. Okay, I mean, thank God it wasn't a DUI, but he still like, incurred a bunch of charges, and so they haul him down to the jail, the county jail in town there in Detroit Lakes, and like we, so we, so we all like we're done we're done, we're out of there, like I don't even want to be there anymore. We go down to the jail, like we go down there, and we're like, hey, we're trying to figure out like, okay, can we bail him out? And she picks like whoever's like they had somebody work in the front desk, and she picks the phone up and like calls back, to where the actual jail is, or the holding area or whatever is.
The drunk tank or whatever they got.
Yeah, like I'm not sure what it was. And I'm not shitting you. We could literally hear him through the phone.
Oh, screaming.
Like, oh yeah. And she kind of like politely hangs up the phone and looks back at us, and she's like, he's not leaving. Like, that's
not
it.
Like this. Yeah.
And he had been a long time. I mean, he came to he had been with us for a number of years. It was not like he was a new player. And we never saw him again after that. And that's one of the reasons why having had those experiences, some of those types of experiences, and that's I would say that, I've had a couple of things like that kind of happen where alcohol becomes a factor, and now it's affecting detrimentally somebody in the program or the program itself. Somebody perceives us in a way, out in the community or something like that. They're just a bunch of drunks, or they're a bunch of hooligans or whatever. Over the years, I've had to really kind of bring my awareness into like, hey, like, so we need to be really mindful about that. And that hasn't always been well perceived, both in the Minnesota program and at large. Like, some people come to the program and they can't conceptualize what we're doing beyond adult beer league hockey, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the reality is based on everything that I already described to you about the origins of this program, that was never the intent. Correct. We intended to be a hockey club, a hockey program, and probably more importantly, a veterans nonprofit. In fact, a veterans nonprofit first, then a hockey program. But we wanted, so, I mean, why should people give us money? Just because we exist? Just because we're disabled veterans? Well, no, we have a responsibility to be about what we're doing what we say we are. Educate. So the mantra would be educate, train, and motivate. Okay. Well, so when I show up with a freaking 24 briefcase of Busch Light and I slap it down in the middle of my locker room and I say, okay, we're here to work, what message does that send? Especially when you don't know what people are going through in your locker room.
Yeah. And that's a big thing too. Maybe somebody, a lot of guys struggle. So,
yeah,
we try, and at least in our program, we try to identify that and have that sidebar conversation. But like Larry said, at the end of the day, you can't control what everybody does.
Well, we're adults, right? And I think that's relevant. And I mean, Larry, through his son Danny, listen, it's what I would say is it's okay to have a beer, but there needs to be a clear line and a clear distinction about when and where that's happening.
Right.
Okay. And I think that, kind of like what you said with Barry down there.
Yeah.
If you guys are keeping it out of your locker room and you're keeping it off the ice, like don't show up to my practice with a freaking bottle of Fireball and put it on my bench. Okay. That's not the program. But I'm telling you, I have witnessed that happen. I have witnessed that go on. And then you get guys, we show up down in Florida, or we show up out in New Jersey, or we show up in Pittsburgh, and all the guys want to do is drink. And, I think if you talked with people, I mean, the way that, like, so when I go on a road trip or I show up to a tournament, it's game time. I am ready to play. I have probably been training for 2 months for that tournament. I've been in the gym. I've been eating right. And when I show up, I'm not like, I don't have time for alcohol.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I told my guys all those years up in Minnesota is, hey, I'll have a drink with you after we win, after we get it done, or we lose.
I remember you saying that more than once. So
yeah, or we lose in the process, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not all about winning, but it's like when I think the point is when we get our work done, okay, then we can have some camaraderie. Or at practice, we get our work done. Because I'll tell you what, it feels great. Like those that know me know that, like, yeah, I'll have a beer with you or two afterwards, but it feels so great, and that beer just tastes better after I know that I showed up and I worked my ass off.
Yeah.
And that we did the program first. And that we're like, it's not sitting in our locker room so that, the guys that don't want to be around that don't have to be around it. The guys that want to do that after of their own volition can do it.
And if you had, so I wanted to kind of wrap it up, but,
yeah.
What, Danny, why don't you go ahead and,
yeah, I had like, to wrap it up basically, if you could share one piece of advice with veterans who might be struggling to find a sense of purpose or community after service, what would it be?
I think that what I would say right up front is that, speaking to my own experience, one of going all the way back to my initial reintegration, coming home from the war and the conflict and all those things in 2007, one of the ways that I think I mentally kind of duped myself into a belief that, like, nobody understands what I've been through except me, and I'm all alone. And I think the first piece of advice that I would offer is that you are not alone. And we're kind of I've heard it said in some of my philosophy courses that I took at the University of St. Thomas as a younger student there when I was going on Chapter 31 Voc Rehab, was that wherever you look, there's something to be seen. So I think the piece of advice there is number one, you're not alone. There are groups of veterans, and there's actually a lot happening, not just with like Warrior Hockey. Warrior Hockey is but one such activity-based program model that's going to get you out of your house and interacting with veterans. There's a lot of hunting and fishing and mountain climbing, and I don't care. I mean, all the way down to whatever your interest is. I don't care if it's basketball, like flag football. I don't care if it's underwater basket weaving. If you're in that place and you feel that you're struggling and you know that you're struggling, again, one of the mistakes I made was kind of duping myself into a thought process that, oh, I have no incentive to do anything and get out of the house because nobody could possibly understand. No, quite the opposite. And I would encourage any veteran to really, it's, first of all, it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to like, I think you can redefine what a good day is versus a bad day. And if you're having a good day, hey, look, take that step in faith and reach out for help if you need it. Reach out to or a group or a program like the Warriors. And that's, kind of going back to what we said before, which is why for any Warrior program, it is critical, in my view, that you conduct yourself as a veterans nonprofit first, because that applicant, you don't know if they're on like how they're coming to the program and how they experience that program right up front could be the difference on do they stay with us, such that if we say that the program saves lives, okay, how, why? Well, how they experience our program right up front. It's for every Warrior program, you need to conduct yourself in a certain way. There needs to be a line between kind of that party time versus, hey, we are glad you're here. You are in an environment where you are understood and valued probably more importantly. I mean, yeah, you can understand somebody, but are you valued? And do they experience that value? But with warrior hockey specifically, to go back to Danny's question, just reach out and check it out. That would be my advice, is you are not alone. This program exists. I mean, so that veteran, this program exists for them. Step out in faith and just reach. And I think that, what a lot of folks, certainly up in Minnesota, and I've actually heard some of this in Colorado too, is that, hey, it was really nerve-wracking to reach out and connect with the program, but I'm so glad I did. I've heard that more times than I can count. That would be, I don't know, that would be my advice is, again, to kind of recap, don't dupe yourself into thinking that you're alone. Sometimes you have to act opposite to how you're feeling. Do it anyway. I bet you won't regret it.
Awesome, dude. Dude, it was really good to have you. I really appreciate that. And speaking of getting things started, page 1 of your book, you might just start writing tonight. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think it is a book just because, to be honest, we've spent almost 2 hours, I think
about 3, my friend.
Yeah, and it's I mean, because you're right about one thing. I've told it so many times that it's man, I think that, one of the things I would say is I think there's a lot of new programs and new members to the program that don't know the story, and they're like, who is this guy and how did this come about, and why does this exist?
Well, and to your many points, the fact, because when I text you, I'm like, man, well, this needs to be said to everybody that it's not a beer league. This is a program for healing. This is a program for what we laugh and we could talk about in the locker room. We share our war stories,
right?
And not have to, the guy next to you is going to understand. We don't have to spell out every military acronym and things like that because you just never served or something like that. Yeah. And you have that level of comfort. So
I want you to be in that environment, but also how does it differ from adult hockey? Well, very simply, we're here to work. Yeah. We're we compete in a nationwide, program model, and we're here to do work. I want every single member of the program to show up and have to do some work. And I want you to do it together. And I want you to walk away from the rink eating better, sleeping better, get into a gym. At the end of the day, it's about, I want every single program member to live better and do better. If we look at the issue of, for example, veteran suicide or rates of substance use or divorce or things like that, a lot of that, when we talk about how the program helps its participants, it's not therapy for therapy's sake. I come in and I spill my feelings and talk, and cry my eyes out for an hour with somebody that I don't know, that probably never served a day in the military. Okay. No, the program helps because as a result of participating in it, I'm a better version of myself at home. I'm a better version of myself at work. I eat better. I sleep better. The fundamental tenets of basic human well-being are addressed in the context of the program model. But I would also say that that's where a lot of participants and a lot of our members, they're missing the program. You're missing, well, no, you're not missing the program. You're missing a chunk of the program. Okay. Showing up and being in the locker room, that's a start. That's where I think that's a foundational piece of the program. But there's more. You can get so much from the program, so much intrinsic benefit from the program in terms of how you're doing life if you give yourself over to it. Show up to work, challenge yourself, eat better, sleep better, exercise, take care of the basics away from the rink so that every single time you're coming back, you're showing up an even better version of yourself. Watch what happens to your depression and anxiety. Watch what happens to your self-esteem.
Yep. That's a good, I think, boys, that's a good ending point. Danny, you want to close it out?
Close it out, yeah. It's been an honor to have you, Andy. You're a huge inspiration. We wouldn't be where we are as the Central Florida Warriors without you laying down the groundwork. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate that, Danny. And I would add to that, with the help of a lot of other folks who gave a lot of their time and energy. The next time you guys are at practice, tell Barry hi, number one, from me, and number two, Barry is an example of a guy that he's got a lot of time and energy into this thing too. So you can definitely thank him. But I would just emphasize that there's a lot of folks that gave a ton of their time and energy and attention and knowledge and mentorship and everything, not just me. So, frankly, it is a privilege, but also it kind of blows my mind where it is today. So I would just end on that note right there, I think.
Sounds good, boys.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody, let's go get some dinner. What time is it in Colorado?
I'm going to cut the recording.
Yeah, you can cut.
What time is it?